3. Good.
These are the times that try men's souls. The government is corrupt. The political system is dysfunctional. Both political parties have not only failed us, they have betrayed us. We cannot trust them with our futures. We, the people, must take back control ourselves. Good evening. Welcome to the Revolution, and welcome to Revolution Television and Revolution Radio. My name is Lawrence Hebron. Before we get into tonight's news commentary, I want to make a scheduling announcement. First, Revolution Radio will be joining Revolution Television on the American Eagle Alliance website, which is AEA4USA.com. Now that's AEA, the number 4, USA.com. You'll be able to continue to hear and see our program every week. However, after next week, Revolution Radio will no longer be available on Blog Talk Radio. We've had a number of people tell us that they have often had trouble logging in to hear our program, both the live and the archived versions, and that the audio quality is often poor. So we've made the changes we mentioned before, and we want to hope that this will provide better service for all of you listening in. Second, the live program will be done on Monday evenings, so you will be able to hear us on AEA4USA.com starting earlier in the day on Tuesdays, and hopefully this will be more convenient for some of you. Again, after next week's program, March 10th, Revolution Radio and Revolution Television will no longer be available on Blog Talk Radio. And now for our revolutionary look at the news. Headline: Iraqi forces may not be ready for new offensive. Military operations to retake Iraq's second largest city from the Islamic State savages are scheduled to kick off in just 2 to 3 months. But Iraqi officials argued that they haven't received the advanced weapons they need to carry out the mission, and others wonder if they will be properly trained in time to get the job done. An official with the United States Central Command provided some details about the upcoming operation. A coordinated military mission to retake Mosul is scheduled to begin in April or May. The core of the fighting force will consist of 5 of Iraq's best American-trained brigades, totaling about 25,000 troops. But what you just heard is a pretty good working definition of criminal incompetence on the part of the Obama administration. But then I guess that's what we've got to expect when you have a Marxist, globalist community organizer as your commander-in-chief. Think about it. Didn't he just tell the enemy where we are going, when we are coming, what will be the size of the attacking force, who will constitute that force, and, by piecing all those bits of the puzzle together, how we are likely to attack, and then give them 2 to 3 months or more to plan for our arrival? Heck, Mr. Obama, why don't you just mail them a copy of the operation order? Back in 1973, as a newly commissioned butter bars, or second lieutenant, in the Marine Corps, I was going through basic school at Quantico, Virginia. Now, early on, we rookies were taught 9 principles of war, which we remembered with the acronym MUSMUS, which stands for maneuver, offensive, objective, surprise, economy of force, mass, unity of command, simplicity, and security. Now, did anyone else hear me say the word surprise? Yeah. Is it any surprise that it's in there? Even the lamest, non-military numbskull ought to be able to figure out this one, but apparently our commander-in-chief cannot. He allows his subordinates literally to broadcast to the world all the pertinent details of the upcoming operation. You know, the one to take Mosul 2 to 3 months from now, with 5 brigades of Iraq's best American-trained troops who may or may not know how to use the advanced weaponry we probably will give them, hopefully in time to get familiar with it before they have to cross the line of departure. Yeah, that operation. This would be laughable if so much weren't on the line, including thousands of lives, billions of dollars, and the security of our own homeland. Well, let's take a couple of minutes to put this in perspective. In 1781, General George Washington learned that General Cornwallis had been ordered into an area which put him at a significant tactical disadvantage. Seeing an opportunity, Washington ordered his army, encamped around the British forces in New York City, to begin a long march south to engage Cornwallis, who was holed up in Yorktown, Virginia. He went to great lengths to deceive the British about his intentions. In fact, he worked hard to give the impression that he had never left New York at all. Troops were left behind to simulate ongoing activities consistent with the presence of a much larger force. The routes selected for his advancing army were chosen with an eye to conceal their movement from British spies and sympathizers. Great attention was given to the various principles of war, musmas, which include surprise and secrecy. The result was a stunning victory, which for all practical purposes decided the outcome of the revolution. In 1944, as Allied forces were preparing for the Normandy invasion, General Eisenhower, his staff, and subordinate units went to great lengths to disguise their intentions. Hitler, who first suspected an invasion would come at Normandy, was convinced by his staff and Allied activities that the landing would take place farther north, around Pas-de-Calais. He shifted critical units and supplies to defend against the anticipated attack. When the landing did begin, Hitler, still believing that the assault at Normandy was just a feint, delayed sending reinforcements south until it was too late. The Normandy beachhead had been established by honoring the principles of musmas, not the least of which was surprise. The fate of the Third Reich had been sealed. Washington, Eisenhower, and uncounted other military commanders throughout history have clearly understood what Obama apparently cannot even imagine. You don't tell the enemy what you're up to, unless, of course, you want to lose. Now, compare the work of history's great strategists and commanders with the bumbling, amateurish ineptitude of the Obama administration. Okay, so maybe he didn't go to West Point, Annapolis, or even Quantico. But shouldn't it be obvious to even a borderline moron that you should keep your military plans a secret from the enemy? Well, Ian is with us again here tonight. Ian, you served proudly and competently in the armed forces of the United States, namely the Army Rangers. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Thank you, and same back at you.
Well, thank you. Second, I'd like to ask, what do you think of Obama's tell and kiss approach to military planning?
I would say, can we expect anything different from a community organizer, from a professor of quote-unquote constitutional law? He has no clue about military operations. And if we expand just a little bit on what you were talking about with the Normandy invasion, the Americans and British came up with a very, very clever method of creating puppet airborne parachutists that they dropped into the Pas-de-Calais area in order to deceive the Germans. You know, once they discovered that they were puppets falling down, they still thought it was a feint. You don't advertise what you're going to do to an enemy. I think it wasn't even Sun Tzu had some pretty clever sayings about surprise and dominating the enemy. This guy has no clue of military tactics. And to me, this is exactly why I think we need an amendment to the Constitution that says that anybody to serve in the seat of commander-in-chief must have served in the military before being elected. I just can't see any other way to make this happen. And I think what is amazing here is we're looking at some incredible incompetence. And I have to wonder, with the access that he has to planners and generals with a lot more experience than I'll ever have, if there is not evil intent in his goal. There is no other way that I can make this make sense in my head. I mean, any kid that's been in a street fight can tell you that you don't advertise what you're going to do before you do it.
Absolutely true. And I'm reminded of a saying here that seems to apply very well in this situation. A fool is impressed with how much he knows. A wise man stands in awe of how little he knows. I'd like to think that Obama, knowing that he didn't go through any kind of formal military training or anything close to it, would at least realize how much he does not know and rely on those who do know better. But he doesn't even do that. You know, an oft-repeated slogan during World War II was "Loose lips sink ships." The meaning was clear. Don't talk about anything that could tip off the enemy regarding our intentions. American lives and the success of the war effort were at stake. If a member of the armed forces or even a civilian committed such an offense, the consequences would be severe. Now, Ian, are things somehow so different now that we should tolerate such dangerous incompetence by our commander-in-chief? Are we so used to everything being televised that it's okay now to just let it all hang out and tell them what's going on? Or is this still incompetence and, in fact, dangerous incompetence, and should we tolerate it by our commander-in-chief?
Absolutely not. We should not be tolerating any of this. This guy is an absolute moron, in my opinion. You don't televise what you're going to do before you do it. Now, just to kind of expand on that a little bit, who is going to be responsible for the lives that are lost because of the lack of surprise? Somebody should be held accountable. Nobody's ever held to account in Washington, though, for some reason. It just doesn't exist. There is no accountability ever in Washington. Obama has purged the military of all of the top commanders that we have. I think what's left is probably the yes men, the few that are just trying to survive long enough to retire. But everybody else has been purged from the military, all of the top commanders. And kind of being a student of history, the closest thing that I can remember to that is Stalin purging his generals and his military prior to World War II. And it devastated the Russian military early on in the war years. You know, you look at the morale of the military, you look at the readiness reports of the military coming out. We have total incompetence running the show in Washington. There is just no other way to figure it. It's either total incompetence or it's evil disguised as incompetence.
You know, during the time that I served on active duty and then later in the reserves, I was very conscious. This was a conscious thought on my part, just about every day, that I was looking into the faces of men who would die if I didn't do my job right. It's how serious it is in the military. I wonder if Obama has ever had that thought. I wonder if it has ever crossed his mind that lives, thousands of them, are depending upon the decisions he makes and how he comports himself. Well, you mentioned before about evil intent, and then you mentioned it again, and we're going to get to that question a little bit later on after we've looked at a couple of other issues. But I want to wrap this one up before we go on to the second one and ask an opinion of you again. I can't imagine, under these circumstances, how even the most fawning idolaters of Obama could possibly excuse this one. They've excused so many other things, but how can you possibly excuse this? This is not politics. This is not ideology. This could kill Americans, our allies, and our chances to succeed against ISIS. To me, this is criminal, and any commander of conscience and integrity would resign. But I don't think Obama will do that. Ian, what do you think should be the response of the nation and of the commander-in-chief under these circumstances?
Well, that's kind of a difficult question. I think that, unfortunately, we're stuck with this guy. There's enough people in this country that are as you say, fawning over this guy, thinking he's some sort of messiah, that they've reelected him again. And we're stuck with him for the next 2 years unless we can figure out somehow how to impeach him. The scary thought to me is we impeach Obama and then we have Biden. I don't know, maybe he's just a useful idiot, maybe more controllable than Obama. You know, when I look at Obama and I look at Biden, when I look at Obama's decisions and what he does, his actions, that is, again, to me, evil intent. He does not have the best interest of this country in mind. When I listen to Biden, I just see a useful idiot. He's a moron that just can't figure out how to keep his mouth shut and how to keep his foot out of his mouth. I don't know who's more dangerous. I really don't. But as far as what we can do as a people, you know, we're at a very difficult crossroads here. I honestly believe that World War III has already started. We just don't want to admit it yet. Just like the world didn't want to admit that World War II had already started. We have an equivalent of the Neville Chamberlain or a very evil person running the show. I'm kind of in a loss to figure out who he is right now. His actions tell me that it's planned, it's evil. And as a people, I hate to say it, but I don't want to see our kids committed. I don't want to see my kids committed to fighting a battle that they have no intention of fighting to win. So we're going to sacrifice our kids for what? The rest of the world isn't going to sacrifice their kids. They think that we should do it. And I don't want to fight any more wars unless we're in it to win. That's what really pisses me off. I am not ready to fight wars and put my children into battle to die for a moron that has no intention of winning a war.
Well, as you mentioned, we really are in quite a fix here. If we get rid of Obama, then we've got Biden. You know, is that the best we can do? This is why it is so critical for Americans to take very seriously this precious right that they have been given to select their national leaders. I mean, the last two elections, they did, last two presidential elections, they did a poor job, worse than poor job, a criminal job, and history will, I think, record that very well. Regarding Biden, just let me throw in one thing here. It was just about a little over a year ago. I attended a Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association conference and met some really fine constitutional sheriffs and peace officers there. One of them happened to be from Delaware, which is where Senator Biden came from, and I guess his son, Beau, has been governor of Delaware. And this particular sheriff was telling me that this is one of the most corrupt families you can imagine. Just absolute corruption there. So whether he's a useful idiot or evil, he's definitely corrupt, according to an eyewitness there as a police officer in the area. Well, we're going to move on to our next headline. Obama considering slowdown for Afghan pullout. The hit parade of blood-soaked, bumbling incompetence just seems to keep rolling forth from this White House. The new Pentagon chief, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, recently announced that President Obama is thinking about slowing down the troop withdrawal from Afghanistan and reconsidering the scope of the counterterrorist mission there. Why? Because the president is awash with hope that the formation of the new unity government in Kabul last year offers the prospect of progress in the ongoing battle against Islamic terrorists in the area, although he won't use that term. Ah, the audacity of hope. Someone should write a book about that. The Obama administration's current plan calls for reducing troop levels to 1/2 of the present 10,000 by the end of this year and to nearly 0 by the end of 2016. Now, Carter didn't give specific details. Oh, if that were only true about what's going on in Iraq, we wouldn't have that first segment to talk about. But he didn't give specific details, probably because they're still trying to figure out what the heck to do. But he did say that Obama is considering slowing down the pace of the withdrawal, altering the timing of various base closures, and rethinking the details of the American counterterrorism mission in Afghanistan. Obama also seems heartened by the prospect of new negotiations between the Afghan government and the Taliban. Can you spell pipe dream? Really, does anyone actually expect any of these preconditions to happen? Well, let's ask. Ian, what's your assessment? What do you think the chances are for this new unity government in Afghanistan to be unified and competent?
Not a chance in hell. We're talking about a country here that has no concept of national sovereignty. They have no concept of a national government. Their whole concept of governance is a chief, like a small group of a clan, a small group of people living in a village, and they have some sort of chieftain. That is their concept of leadership. They will never be. They will never show loyalty to any sort of national government. It's not in their DNA. They have no concept of fighting as a massive force. I just don't see this happening. It's just a pipe dream, like you said. And it's just one more example of how this guy has not a clue of what he's doing in the world. His incompetence is going to kill millions of people, in my opinion. You know, and when we look at the Afghan war and how we fought it, we've done slightly better than the Russians, I guess you could say. But it is, again, a classic example of fighting a battle with no intention of winning it. And this whole concept seems to have come out of World War I, where we think that we should be rebuilding all of these nations and trying to turn them into a some sort of democracy. These people are never going to be a democracy. They are going to bow to Allah, and they're going to bow to their little clan chieftain, and that is the extent of their loyalty. This is never going to happen in this part of the world. They don't understand the concept of freedom as we understand it. They have no desire for it.
Well, you've given an excellent and very brief, concise thumbnail sketch of the situation in Afghanistan, and you ought to be on the president's staff, except that I'm sure they wouldn't listen to you because I think other things are at work here. But even if you didn't know this about Afghanistan, I don't think you need to be an expert on Afghan history and politics to know what's going to happen here. I mean, look at our own government. We can't even get the reps and the Dems to work together, and we have a relatively prosperous, stable, and civilized society. So what kind of person would expect the Afghanistanis to pull it off? And then you throw the Taliban and the effects of the war into the mix, you have a real recipe for catastrophe. And the president wants to keep us there in the middle of it all. Now, this seems to me like more evidence of criminal incompetence on the part of the administration. Ian, how do you size it up?
Well, I agree. It's criminal incompetence. And then I have to ask, why is at the same time is he trying to make sure that the Iranians have their nuclear bomb? What is his goal? That's like saying, okay, Germany, we're going to let you build a nuclear weapon, even though we know we're going to have to do war with you down the road, but we'll let you do it anyway, just because we don't want to create problems for you. And that's the extent of it. You know, these Iranians get a hold of the nuke, they will use it. They're sitting right next to Afghanistan, and on the other side of that is all of this area in the Middle East that we're going to be dealing with for many, many decades to come. I have to wonder what his motivation is. He knows that the Iranians will use it against the Israelis at some point. They've said that they're going to do it. Why don't we believe them? You know, and again, I know I'm taking it away from Afghanistan, but it's all part of the big overall puzzle. And I have to really wonder why he's so intent on what he thinks is negotiation is giving them everything that they want. You know, these guys must be looking at us like we're a bunch of village idiots. Because I just don't see I don't see a plan here. There is no plan. His plan is to allow them to take over that whole part of the world, I guess. I don't know.
Absolutely, and you've touched upon something we plan on talking about next week in more detail, and that's the president's recently announced new policy regarding Iran and dealing with them. Beyond, there is an issue though beyond the mismanagement of the current Afghan policy. There is a much bigger question here, and that bigger question is just what are we trying to accomplish in Afghanistan and the surrounding areas? What is our mission? What is the goal? You know, good policy has to have a good mission, a good objective. The policy needs to be driven by the objective. If your objective stinks, guess what? It doesn't matter how good your tactics are, they're going to stink too. They're not going to have good results. So the bigger question here that I wanted to talk on about for a little bit here with you, Ian, and for those who are listening, is just what are we trying to accomplish in Afghanistan, and will it work? Well, in the first place, if you haven't figured it out already, let me clue you in. We're not going to create a little America with a democratic republic there. So forget about that option. They're simply not ready for it. And yet that seems to be the objective of our policymakers, to accomplish something that can't be accomplished because the foundation isn't there. It's like trying to build the third floor of a building when the foundation hasn't been constructed yet. They don't have the prerequisites for such a governing system as ours. Beyond that, the area, as you mentioned, is fragmented into fiefdoms of various warlords, all seeking greater power at someone else's expense. And then throw into the mix a rash of religious nut jobs, and you've got quite a catastrophic concoction going on there. And what does Obama want to do? Stay longer, spend more trillions, kill more Americans. Well, let me sum up my feelings this way, and then we'll see what Ian thinks. When you walk up to a cesspool, you basically have two choices. You can step around it, or you can step in it. We stepped in it. But once you've stepped in a cesspool, you've basically got two choices. You can either stay there, or you can get out. We've stayed. And to those who argue that we need to stay and fight the war on terror and protect American interests, I have a simple question for you. Do you really think we're safer now than we were 12 years ago? We've spent about $4 trillion in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've lost about 4,000 Americans dead, plus thousands and thousands more wounded. Do you feel safer now than 12 years ago? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm 100% behind fighting the war on terror, but I'm also 100% convinced that we're going about it the wrong way. So, Ian, your thoughts on the bigger picture regarding the wisdom of fighting the way we are in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Bound to lose. There is no way to win a war fighting it this way. And, you know, I'm just a humble sergeant, just a humble staff sergeant that did a few years. But I'll tell you what I would do differently. I would do something similar to the approach that we took during the Second World War. During the Second World War, we were ready to and did wipe out entire cities in order to win the war. There was no question that we were going to win it. Here, they have no plan beyond next month, and there is no desire to win it. So if we're not going to win it, why are we fighting it? Unfortunately, I think that we're in a position where we will, you know, our choice is either fight them over there or fight them over here. But again, I don't want to see us engaged in any more conflicts if we're not ready to win them. And, you know, this whole thing, thinking that we're going to go over and turn them into our friends is just ludicrous. These people have no interest in being our friends. And we think that we're going to go over there and make Afghanistan government our friends and somehow bring all these people into the fold of you know, of civil society. Only a moron could believe that. And I'm so frustrated with the whole thought of this. You know, it's obvious that we're seeing the rise of another Nazi empire. These people are just as bad as the Nazis were. We've got bodies stacked up like cordwood, just like we had after the Second World War. And it's only beginning. And we have John Kerry and, Susan Rice and Obama and Biden trying to figure out how the world is going to survive this next Holocaust. Well, something to think about. During World War II, we were the only ones that had the bomb, and that was after spending a few $1 million to develop it. India has the bomb. Pakistan has the bomb. Iran probably has the bomb. North Korea has the bomb and is probably selling it to anybody that has a dime. We've got developing countries all over the place that have access to nuclear technology. What is the world going to look like after this mushroom cloud goes up in the Middle East? And that's going to be the result. That's where we're headed. We better start figuring out a way to win it.
Well, I agree, and you've said a couple of important things here, kind of anticipating some of the things we'll be talking about in future episodes of Revolution Television and Revolution Radio, but I guess we can go ahead and pop the cork a little bit right now. You mentioned that you believe that we've already fought the first battle, seen the first battles of World War III, and I think history will document that as well. You said we either have to fight them over there or fight them here, and I believe the history will document that too, and I think that's an important planning consideration that we have to have. So what do? We don't keep doing what we've been doing. I got interested in politics back in the 60s as a teenager, so I've been listening to this stuff. It's getting close to 50 years now. And it started to occur to me a few years back that I keep reading the same headlines in the paper now that I read back in the 60s about the troubles over there. We have spent trillions and thousands of lives, and we have gotten nowhere. All we did is the old saying about kicking the can down the road. That's all we're doing. We are not settling anything. We are not looking for solutions. We're trying to manage an unmanageable situation. It doesn't work. Now, one of the things we have to keep in mind is there are certain areas of this globe that are going to be important no matter who lives there. A strategist, somebody with a sense of strategy, could look at the globe and just say, well, you know what? That's an important area. That's an important area. That's an important area. And that's an important area. You don't care who lives there. Those are important areas. And the Eastern Mediterranean is one of those, period. And one of the things that I think that we should do, and I'll say here too, what we're going to be fighting, well, who's our enemy in World War III? It's not going to be radical Islam. I don't think the danger is radical Islam. The danger is Islam. And we'll be giving a report. We're already preparing a report now that we will be giving to you a few weeks down the road here on the danger of Islam and Sharia law, and to show you that it is not the radicals that are the danger. This is a radical religion. It has been for 1,500 years. It is a warlike religion. It oppresses people, even their own people. And if you are an infidel, not one of them, well, then it's even worse. That is the danger. And because of people like Obama, because of incompetent management, and really, he's probably the worst. Well, he's definitely the worst. But for decades, we have incompetent management of the situation over there. As I said, I keep reading the same headlines over and over and over again. We're getting nowhere. So, in a nutshell, here's what I think we need to do. Throw something out there that's really pretty radical and give you something to chew on. One, we need to establish a very large, secure Israel. Much larger than it is now. I would say the biblical definition, which was never accomplished. It wasn't accomplished by Joshua. It wasn't accomplished by Saul or David or Solomon. But if Israel had those kinds of borders, it would be secure militarily, economically, and in a variety of other ways. Next to that, we need a secure Christian nation so that the kind of atrocities that are already being committed by ISIS and others would not be taking place, so that Christians in the area would have a safe place to live. So we have a safe place for the Jews, who are our best and strongest and most faithful allies in the area. And I have no illusions about them. It's not a perfect relationship, even if we didn't have Obama as a president. Israel is no longer, it is a secular nation. A lot of my Christian friends have this idyllic notion about it being the the Israel of the Left Behind novel series. It is not. It is largely a socialist economy, which is not something that we agree with. A lot of the religious Jews who are over there don't care much for Christians and are fairly opposed to them. But be that as it may, even with all that, you're never going to have a perfect relationship. So I'm not a fawning idolater of Israel, but there are best friends over there. There are strongest allies over there. They occupy a strategic area that is critical. And I believe we need to really support them. Move in, set up a much larger Israel, set up a Christian nation right next to them that is also large and secure. Let Turkey know that we're going to be friends, like it or not. See, Turkey is an extremely strategic area. You know what Putin's up to in Crimea? It has nothing to do with Crimea. It has everything to do with getting to the Atlantic. You see, in a planet where 71% of the world's surface is covered by water, you cannot be a global force if you do not have a navy that can sail around the calendar. Not just around the world, but around the calendar. And Russia has always been lacking in those warm water ports so that they can set sail and take care of their navy during the winter. That's why Crimea is so important, because it is the first stepping stone. It is the stepping stone into the Black Sea and the Sea of Amos, which then leads to the Turkish Straits, the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, which then leads to the Mediterranean, which leads to Gibraltar, which leads to the Atlantic. And that's what they're looking for. If we can bottle them up by having a strong relationship with whoever's in Turkey, we just really did a good job of controlling the Russian bear. So Turkey, a Christian nation, and a secure Christian nation and a secure Jewish nation in the Eastern Mediterranean. That should be our objective. Beyond that, if it creates turmoil in the Arab and the Islamic world, fine. They'll take themselves out. They won't be part of the equation. And then we just let every nation out there in that area know that if the United States comes under attack again by any terrorist nation, we're not going to spend months and years trying to figure out who backed them up. We know that you can influence these people. We know that you can influence and stop the most radical of them. So we're just going to pick a name out of the hat. We've got 20, 30 cities here. You want to lose it? Well, if you don't, then stop the radicals. Stop them on your side of the border before they get to us. Well, is that radical enough for you? Now you know why we call it Revolution Radio and Revolution Television. We do need to do something different, because what we've been doing doesn't work, unless, of course, you make money off of all this war. And we're going to get to that point here again as we lead into our third issue. Rounding out the trifecta of bumbling incompetence, our next headline, Obama vetoes Keystone Pipeline. Well, no surprise there. He promised to do it, and everybody expected him to keep that promise. The shocker is, why? Why would he do that? I mean, we know he has his environmentalist friends and all that stuff, but this is just plain dumb. His inept foreign policy has not only made a shambles of many of the world's greatest oil producers, he also has weakened our relationship with many of them. This not only reduces the output potential of oil producers, thereby creating unnecessary shortages and increasing prices at the pump for all of us, it also hurts our ability to acquire this increasingly short supply of vital energy resources. The Keystone Pipeline should seem like a godsend under any circumstances, but especially after a bozo has gone traipsing through the Middle East oil fields with his big clumsy clown shoes wreaking havoc. Any honorable incompetent would welcome the opportunity to get bailed out from the consequences of his own folly, but Obama spurns it. So what's going on here? Is he trying to cripple the nation he swore to preserve, protect, and defend? And that leads us to a bigger question. Is Obama really that incompetent, or is he trying to weaken America? I know it sounds a bit outrageous to many, but let's consider the evidence. And certainly, Ian has already brought this up in his question about evil intent. Now, there's no question that America has its enemies. Nobody can debate that. There's no question that these enemies want to see America fall, because a strong America stands in the way of accomplishing their agenda. Nobody can debate that. There is no question that these enemies have a plan to bring down America, and that they have been working on this plan diligently for decades. No question about that. If you have, you should have listened to our Rebels Road sequence a few months back. You'd know better. Now, when you look at pretty much everything Obama has done, it all goes to undermine the foundation of a strong America. So we've got to ask, do America's enemies have an agent working for them right from the Oval Office? Pretty serious charge. So Ian, you've already talked about evil intent. What do you think? Is the intent being realized?
Oh, I think you're hitting it right on the head. I've got to ask, who's in charge? We already know that George Soros has his fingers deep in this, and he's brought down whole economies of whole nations. What is the intent here? There is nothing in his actions that shows us that he has anything but the destruction, the destruction of our country in mind. There's nothing in his actions that is building up the country, that is making it stronger, that is making it better. And again, let's look at the evidence. He's devastated our economy. He's devastated our ability to survive as a people. He has reduced the middle class into poverty. He has brought, through bailouts and through the banking system, he has destroyed the country financially. He has purged the military. He has weakened the military, and he has given, a free pass to all of our enemies. And then at the same time, he has taken our best allies and turned them into almost enemies. He has taken the British, our best ally, insulted them, and for all intents and purposes, almost destroyed that relationship. Our relationship with Israel is another classic example. He seems to be best buddies with Putin. After all, what was it he said? Let's get past this election and we'll make sure we'll do this stuff under the table. Don't worry about it. We'll, trust me. I'll take care of you. What? This guy's our enemy. So let's, let's look at it. He's taken our friends and turned them into enemies. He's trying to make our enemies his friend. Why? What is his motivation? And I think that you've hit, what you were talking about with the, with Turkey and the Middle East. There's a lot of merit there. You want to win it. If you really want to win it, you say, okay, like you said, Turkey, you're our friend, like it or not. What side of history are you going to be on? Now you can do the same thing with the Saudis. Saudi Arabia, yeah, we like your oil. What side of history do you want to be on? Rein in these radicals and bring them into, into civilized society, or guess what? Riyadh will be the first one to go. Park a destroyer off Iran and say, you know what? We've got our anti-ballistic missile system, and if we see a plume leave your country, we will take it out, and Tehran will disappear within 30 minutes after that. What side of history do you want to be on? And we need to be asking ourselves that same question. What side of history do we want to be on when the Third World War is written about in history books?
We gave a very good summary and ticked off a number of bullet points there on Obama's accomplishments, although they are not accomplishments that benefit us. I mean, he has attacked, think about what he has done. And I know if you're listening to this program, you're probably already sympathetic to this and could add to the list, but we only have so much time. Obama has attacked most of the things which have made us great and kept us free. He has consolidated vast and dangerous amounts of power in the federal government and confiscated trillions of dollars from the private sector, transferring them to the control of the power brokers whom he serves, like Soros and others of his buddies. He spurned Christianity and undermined its influence in our society. He has thrown what was left of the Constitution on the bonfire and attempted to rule by fiat. All of these are diametrically opposed to the wisdom and the works of our founders. All of these work to the benefit of America's enemies. And on top of all of this, as you pointed out, Ian, America has been embarrassed and weakened in the world. It is hard to imagine a confessed enemy of this nation hoping to accomplish more in a mere 6 years than our own president has. So again, we must ask, could Obama possibly be so profoundly incompetent? Or is he a skilled and clever enemy of the nation he swore to preserve, protect, and defend? Something all of you listening out there need to be considering, as well as what you're going to do about it. And we'll give you an option here as we get ready to wrap up. But Ian, what is your verdict, and what should we, the people, do? We'll wrap this section up here and give you the last word on all of this.
Well, he's absolutely evil. I can't justify it any other way in my mind. You know, this is a guy that is obviously intelligent. He's not stupid. I think Biden is a useful idiot. I think he's a useful moron. I don't see that in Obama. I don't see it. I think that everything points towards an evil intent. And, you know, it's treason. It's treason. It's not impeachment. It's treason. People in this administration need to be going to prison. And, I mean, just a couple of more things that just keep piling kindling and wood on the bonfire. Just today I was reading a report stating that Obama intends on federalizing law enforcement throughout the entire country. Huh? What? He wants to federalize law enforcement? What could be the goal? What is the goal there? It's not protection of civil rights. It's control and domination over the people. Why does he suddenly have a major interest in suddenly banning various types of ammunition? It's because he knows he can't get gun control through the Senate, through the Congress. So what's his intent? It's not a good intent. There is nothing in his actions that says that he is a benevolent leader, that has the interests of the American people at heart. Everything he does says exactly the opposite. And, you know, only morons watch what they say and ignore what they do. And unfortunately, we are, as a country, we're ignoring what he does and only listening to what he says. And it's time for the American people to wake up, because it's vastly becoming too late to do anything about it.
Just one last quick thing on the federalization of law enforcement. You say we just saw this report here today. Think about it. Put this in perspective as you were talking about that. We talked about it briefly before the show. Think about putting this in perspective. Now look back on all of the federal grants that have made it possible for local police to get, like MRAPs, which is the mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles, basically armored personnel carriers that they use in war, and all of these other assault weapons and things like this. And you gave an excellent report a couple weeks back about all the different SWAT teams that are, and the police forces that are controlled by various federal agencies and bureaucrats, things like this. Some very scary things going on. And when you start putting all those pieces together, yeah, what would otherwise seem spooky and kooky, well, it'd be spooky and kooky not to see what the federal government is up to.
One more quick comment, if I may. When you think, I've kind of always been a student of history, and I've often wondered, how could the German people have allowed the Nazi Empire to come to power? And I think we're seeing it right before our eyes. The Germans thought that the actions of the Nazis were to bring Germany back into a powerful, dominant nation in the world. The actions of Hitler, in their mind, was bringing their sense of pride back as the German people after the devastation of World War I. So if you look at what's going on in the country, step by step, incremental, change by change, unconstitutional executive order after executive order. Every one of these things is one more domino in the system. Now, unlike the German and the Japanese populace, the Germans and the Japanese populace basically were very, their whole society was built on the customs of higher authority and doing basically what they were told to do. The American people aren't like that, and I hope that is the only thing that can save us as a nation. That we are watching happen to us exactly what happened to the German people prior to the Nazis, and the federalization of the German political system. If you remember, Nazis is the National Socialist Workers' Party. It was the nationalization of the German economy and the German people and the Germans as a whole. There was big differences between the Prussians and the Bavarians, for example. It was almost like two separate countries. But the rise of the Nazis brought them together and made them feel like they were strong. Well, and actually what they did was create World War II and the devastation of the Holocaust. I'm afraid that we're headed down that road ourselves, and we're too blind to see it because we don't teach and we don't learn history anymore.
I know this remark is going to be controversial, and I want to make sure that people do not misunderstand me. Hitler was a monster, one of the worst monsters in history. But at least he worked to strengthen his nation as he saw it. He saw it in a perverse and sick way. But he worked to strengthen his nation. We've raised the question that our current leader is working to weaken his nation. Now, what verdict do you make about that? Moving on now, this week in American history. We here at Revolution Television and Revolution Radio are proud of our history, and we want to encourage a reconnection with our proud heritage, a remembrance of America the Great. And so a regular thing we do every week is to review events that happened in our history over the dates of this last week. Some big events, some small events, just kind of a smattering to give us a sense of that great collage that we call the United States. So let's go back to February the 25th and cover the next week in American history. February 25th, 1836. Inventor Samuel Colt received a patent for his revolver. 1836. 1870, this is an interesting one. Hiram R. Revels, a Mississippi Republican, became the first African-American United States Senator when he was sworn in to complete the unexpired term of, ironically, Jefferson Davis, the former president of the Confederate States of America. Boy, there's a lot of irony in that one statement, isn't there? 1913, the 16th Amendment, giving Congress power to levy and collect income taxes, was declared in effect by Secretary of State Philander Chase Knox. Now, last week, you may recall that we reported on February 14, 1778, the United States ship Ranger carried the Stars and Stripes to a foreign port for the first time when it sailed to France. Well, on February 25th, 1933, its namesake, the USS Ranger, was launched at Newport News, Virginia. It was the first U.S. naval ship designed and built as an aircraft carrier. There had been others that had been converted, but this was the first one that was designed and built for that specific purpose. February 26th, 1846, frontiersman and future performer William Frederick Cody was born near LeClaire, Iowa. His stage name would be Buffalo Bill Cody. 1917, President Woodrow Wilson learned of a coded German message called the Zimmermann Telegram, which suggested an alliance be formed between Germany and Mexico. The discovery hastened the United States' entry into World War I. 1919, the Grand Canyon became a national park. 1993, Islamic terrorists set off a bomb in the garage of the New York World Trade Center, killing 6 people. February 27, 1776, the newly commissioned Continental Navy was at sea on its first operation. It was an expedition to the Bahamas to capture sorely needed munitions. The flagship of the little fleet carried a yellow banner that had been presented by Christopher Gadsden of South Carolina. Emblazoned on that yellow ensign was a coiled rattlesnake with a caption, "Don't tread on me." It became a favorite symbol of the Revolution. It still is. 1801, the District of Columbia was placed under the jurisdiction of Congress. 1951, the 22nd Amendment was ratified. It limited a president to serving 2 terms. And in 1991, President Bush I announced the end of the Persian Gulf War, a mere 3 days after the initiation of the ground campaign in that war. That's how you win a war. You go in, you stomp, you get out. A famous German warrior philosopher named von Clausewitz said that the morality of war lies in its brevity. In other words, war is nasty business. If you find you have to fight one, put everything you've got into it, win it fast, and be done. Something our American planners could take a few lessons from. Moving on now to February the 28th, 1827, the Baltimore and Ohio Railway was incorporated. It would be the first commercial railroad in the United States to carry passengers and freight. 1849, the gold rush began in earnest when the steamship California arrived in San Francisco from New York, carrying gold seekers from the East Coast. 1854, opponents to slavery agreed to form a new political party during a meeting at Ripon, Wisconsin. It would later be named the Republican Party. 1932, the last Ford Model A rolled off the assembly line. March 1st, 1781, the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution, went into effect. 1790, President Washington signed a measure authorizing the first United States Census. It is the constitutional requirement to hold a census every 10 years. 1803, Ohio became the 17th state. 1845, President Tyler signed a congressional resolution annexing the Republic of Texas. 1867, Nebraska became the 37th state. In 1872, Yellowstone became the world's first national park. 1932, Charles and Ann Lindbergh's infant son was kidnapped from their home near Hopewell, New Jersey. The boy was killed, and the kidnapper, Richard Hauptmann, was caught, tried, and executed. 1961, President Kennedy established the Peace Corps. Now for March 2nd, 1793, Sam Houston was born near Lexington, Virginia. 1807, Congress outlawed the importation of slaves. 1836, the Republic of Texas declared its independence from Mexico on the birthday of Sam Houston. 1877, Rutherford B. Hayes was declared victor by a presidential electoral commission over Samuel J. Tilden, even though Tilden won the popular vote. 1917, Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory, and its inhabitants became United States citizens. 1949, a B-50 Super Fortress bomber became the first plane to fly non-stop around the world, refueling 4 times en route. The plane's name was Lady Luck II. And now for March 3rd, 1776. The Continental Army prepared to occupy Dorchester Heights outside of Boston. It was a prelude to driving the British from Boston in an early Patriot victory during the Revolution. 1820, Congress passed the Missouri Compromise, admitting Maine as a free state and Missouri as a slave state. 1945, Florida became the 27th state. 1863, Congress passed a Conscription Act that resulted in the first wartime draft in the United States. 1931, Remember this date, March 3rd, 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner was adopted as our national anthem. 2005, adventurer Steve Fawcett became the first person to fly a fixed-wing aircraft around the world without refueling. And that is this date in history. Well, as you've heard, we here at Revolution Radio are not too happy with the way things are going in the country, and we're not too confident in the ability of the Republicans and Democrats to fix what they've broken. And we believe that something a bit more radical needs to be done. The American Eagle Alliance is leading the charge in fighting the Second American Revolution, AR2. Among other things, we conduct Patriot Training Days that will teach you and your organization how to fight and win the Second American Revolution in less time than it took to win the first, without taking over the White House, the Congress, the Supreme Court, or any constitutional amendments, and hopefully without violence. This is a peaceful plan. Whether there's violence or not is not up to us. It's up to the other side. If they bring it, well, we'll be able to manage that, just like we did in AR1. In 1776, we the people rocked the world. It's time to do it again. As you will hear, this is not a rehash of tired, old, failed ideas from the Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, left or right. This is vintage American. This is historic. This is heroic. And this will change everything. So if you'd like to schedule an event in your area for its Patriot organizations, call 909-913-7878. Again, area code 909-913-7878. Or if you would like for me to come by and discuss any of the ideas in Solutions, Guidebook for Rebuilding America the Great, or AR2, Handbook for the Second American Revolution, you can schedule that by calling the same number, 909-913-7878. Those books are both available. Easiest way to get them is through Amazon, and yes, bulk rates are available. We have a number of people call in. They want to get a dozen copies, 20 copies, 30 copies, something like that. So we can accommodate you there. Remember, you can go to aea4usa.com. That's AEA, the number 4, USA.com, and see past recorded episodes as well as the material, other matters of interest to the Patriot community. And you'll be able to hear this program there as well. Now, if you'd like to download our theme song, which you're not going to hear yet, it's called American, but you can go to iTunes and look it up. Look it up under my name. You would do that if you're going to get books from Amazon as well. Hebron. Look it up there, and you will have a little bit of a hint of what it sounds like. It only costs 99 cents, and whenever you buy it or Solutions or AR2, you help to fund the revolution. Well, we always like to wrap up with a quote or quotes of the day, and I sort of apologize, but not really. We're going to repeat the same quotes that we had from last week. And the reason is we've gotten pretty revolutionary again, as our name suggests. And I feel that these quotes on rebellion are very, very appropriate to us today. And so we're going to repeat the same ones we mentioned last week. And again, if you think we're revolutionary, listen to these guys. But again, especially listen to who said these things. For starters, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. Thomas Jefferson. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Benjamin Franklin. There is danger from all men. The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty. John Adams. If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that ye were our countrymen. Samuel Adams. This country, with its institutions, belongs to the people who inhabit it. Whenever they shall grow weary of the existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it, or their revolutionary right to dismember or overthrow it. Abraham Lincoln. in his first inaugural address. And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The remedy is to set them right as to the facts, pardon and pacify them. What signify a few lost lives in a century or two? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Thomas Jefferson. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat it, sir. We must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. Patrick Henry, right before he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Well, thanks for listening. Tell your friends they can listen to archived episodes, and we hope to talk with you again next week on Revolution Television and Revolution Radio. Now, let's get cracking, patriots. We've got a country to save. Good night.